The Incredibles 2 is finally out, and fans and critics alike were oh so pleased with the sequel as it lived up to the expectations set by the first. It also gave us a lot to think about when it comes to the grander scheme of the world, and how it ties together with some other memorable Pixar stories. So today we're returning to our fan theory list about the films, this time focusing more so on theories that have been spawned from Incredibles 2. So this is our list of the top 10 Incredibles theories that will ruin your childhood, part 2. Don't worry, they won't really ruin your childhood. A few of them will though. Also, major spoilers in this video. You've been warned. And at number 10, Freud. Let's start off our list by getting a little weird. A theory from Cameron D. Jackson on the website dapsmagic.com suggests that Violet, Dash, and Jack Jack represent Sigmund Freud's theory about the three-part psyche: the id, the ego, and the superego. If you need to brush up on your Psych 101, the theory in short is that everyone's psyche is made up of three parts that work together or in opposition, making up who you are as a person, and is what dictates your actions. Back to the Incredibles though. Each of the children represent one part of this theory. Jack Jack is the id, our base instinct that reacts out of need. He's incredibly powerful and is unaware of the consequences of his actions. Dash is the ego, who is impulsive, who seeks fulfillment but employs strategies in pursuit of his needs. For example, his whole thing with the remote summoning. Now Violet is the superego, your conscience, that controls the id, and is a product of learned behavior. Now Violet learns to control and protect Jack Jack, and she directs Dash. For example, she sticks with Jack Jack in the final battle and makes Dash wait to bring up their father out of the water until Frozone, an outside influence, lets her know that it's okay to do so. Now hopefully this is the only Freud theory that the children apply to. And at number 9, Frozone works for the government. Speaking of, when the supers were banned, we see how difficult it was for Mr. Incredible to hold down a job. He and his family struggled for a bit, but now look at Frozone. Dude lived in a nice place, had a bunch of expensive equipment, and seemingly didn't have a job in the first film. This has led some fans to speculate that Frozone works as an informant of the government, and he reports back on what some of the most powerful supers are up to. Now other theories are of a similar vein to this, but less nefarious. One suggests that he works for the government not as an informant, but to create fresh water at a faster rate. We see that he's capable of pulling water molecules out of the air, and can create things like water spheres really easily. This means that he is a very useful resource, and his powers may be put to better economic uses, hence why he doesn't seem to have a Joe job. Up next, number 8, Pizza Planet. Now we'll be diving into the Pixar theory in general later on this list, but this smaller theory is just as enjoyable, and acts as an explanation for an Easter egg that appears in the movie. From Reddit user the Dipstick47837, this theory speculates that the pizza deliverer who was brainwashed to act as screenslaver works for Pizza Planet, and that's why the Pizza Planet truck appeared at the start of the movie. It's short and sweet, and no childhoods ruined here. Up next, number 7, Jack Jack and Monsters Inc. Let's expand a bit more on another Pixar tie-in theory. So Jack Jack depicts a variety of powers in the film, including shooting laser beams out of his eyes. He can also teleport. Now one Reddit user by the name of Cryptenix speculated that this not only proves that these two films exist in the same universe, which most of us already are on board with, but that Jack Jack is actually mentioned in Monsters Inc. So during Monsters Inc. there's a scene with a news broadcast that announced a child security breach. A few monsters are interviewed by the channel, and one says, I quote, "Well, a kid flew right over me and blasted a car with its laser vision."
The first time in monster history.
We can neither confirm nor deny the presence of a human child here tonight.
Now this could actually be an example of Jack Jack messing around with his powers, teleporting to the Monsters Inc. dimension and then hitting a car with his laser beam abilities. Not so far-fetched after all, is it? Up next at 6, Void will become evil. Well, technically, Void does act as an antagonizing force in The Incredibles 2, while under the control of Evelyn, that is. But let's backtrack a moment here. So Void is to Helen what Buddy was to Bob. She's a mega fan of Elastigirl, who is her idol. While Helen takes a much kinder approach to Void initially, and that Void by the end of the film is clearly on the side of good, some have speculated that in the next film perhaps she'll become a villain. While that does seem pretty unlikely, and a bit of a weak storytelling device all things considered, the character will likely make a reappearance if there is another sequel, and many think that the character will share a bond with Violet rather than Helen. Sophia Bush, who plays Void, has stated that she'd be interested in seeing more fierce female power between her character and Violet Parr, and the two have a pretty great interaction with each other at the end of The Incredibles 2. Fingers crossed. Up next at 5, The Incredibles 3. There's a theory floating around about the direction of the third and likely inevitable sequel in the Incredibles franchise. Now at the end of the film we see Violet's boyfriend Tony getting kicked out of the car as the family speeds away to go fight crime. As this theory points out, it seems likely that we'll see more of Tony if the series gets another installment, but the question is, in what capacity? Since Violet shoves him out of the car, could it be that her budding new romance could eventually get worn and weary of this kind of behavior, eventually finding out her true identity and turning against her and her family out of resentment? The nature of being a superhero is not an easy one. We've seen the impacts Bob and and Helen's secret identities have had on their attempts of maintaining a normal life. With the sequel, we'll likely dive further into the lives of the children. And now that supers are no longer banned, there's a whole lot of responsibilities that will be on these characters' shoulders, should they continue to act as part of the superhero family team, which opens the door to any sort of semblance of a social life they may have completely going haywire as they continue onwards into their teenage years. Up next at 4, Screenslaver and Syndrome. One theory kicking around on the interwebs is that Screenslaver isn't actually Evelyn, it's Buddy Pine, aka Syndrome. So it was no surprise that Evelyn was behind Screenslaver, but some fans think that perhaps she was being controlled by Syndrome instead of acting out of her own will. Syndrome seemingly died in the first Incredibles film, although we didn't see his death on screen. While there's many a theory that questions whether he's alive, this one assumes that he is, and that he has dissociative personality disorder, a split personality disorder that has a tendency to affect individuals with incredibly high intelligence and creativity, two traits that Buddy most definitely boasted. The idea behind this is that Buddy manipulated Evelyn, knowing her family's connection to supers and her brother's obsession with them, and he would use them as a backup plan if his initial plan failed. A bit of a long shot, but an interesting one nonetheless. Up next, number 3, Ayn Rand. This theory is a two-parter, and takes up this in our next number. So, for starters, back when The Incredibles came out, many fans thought that it was a subtle introduction to the philosophies of Ayn Rand by director-writer Brad Bird, like a kid-friendly version as to why objectivism is good and altruism is bad. If you're unfamiliar with objectivism, it's a belief crafted by Rand that states moral truths exist independently of human knowledge or our perception of them. Reality exists independently of consciousness, and one can attain objective knowledge from perception through the process of concept formation and inductive logic. The moral purpose of one's life is one's own happiness, and rational self-interest and the rights of the individual are the only social systems consistent with this morality. Certain individuals are inherently superior to others, and the inferior will attempt to stifle the natural order by repressing the rights of the individual. So yeah, it's kinda shitty. How does this tie into The Incredibles though? This film takes place in a world where superheroes are outlawed by the government, who are more concerned by the collateral damage they cause than the good they do. Syndrome uses his technological genius to create devices that equalize in order to negate natural order by giving the masses superpowers. When everyone's super, no one will be.
Everyone can be super. And when everyone's super, no one will be.
But that leads us to our number 2 theory, disproven. Aside from Brad Bird calling that theory ridiculous, people still ran with the Rand theory. That is, until The Incredibles 2 came out. Now it's shifted gears. The idea is that Bird's intention with the sequel is to intentionally condemn objectivism, probably because he was so pissed off about the original theory. Screenslaver, who is the main villain of interest in the film, has a monologue early on that's pretty neat. For starters, it's about how people are content to waste away their lives staring at screens, opposed to actually just living. It's done over top a montage that is exactly that. A massive screen distraction that's so compelling that when you first watch the film, you may miss whatever Slaver is saying to begin with. Super meta. It's really well done. Slaver also notes that the superheroes provide complacency to people rather than inspiring them to do great things. All of this makes Screenslaver, or rather Evelyn Deaver, the character behind the villain, quite the objectivist. Thus, objectivism is bad. And finally, in our number 1 spot, the Pixar theory. Now we touched on the Pixar theory briefly on our part 1 list, but since The Incredibles 2 came out, fans have further elaborated on how the sequel ties into the idea that all Pixar films are connected. The theory states that all of the Pixar films exist on one giant timeline within the same world. Since it came to be, there's been a whole lot of embellishing on the theory as new films come out, but typically most believe that it begins with The Good Dinosaur and ends with Monsters Inc., or Brave depending on where you stand with certain details. Regardless, humans serve as a power source of sorts. They're what make the toys in Toy Story come to life, and in Monsters Inc., the monsters travel to the human world to essentially collect energy from humans. You may recognize By and Large, the company that takes over the world in WALL-E, and appears throughout other Pixar titles. Now it's theorized to have been created by the Omnidroid from Incredibles 1. That technology is so smart that it realizes it doesn't need to take commands from humans, hence creating its own company that inevitably rules the planet via capitalism. Monsters Inc. is said to run on a parallel timeline to the main one, and we see that they're running into an energy crisis, meaning there isn't enough fear for them to collect. But by the end of the film, we learn that joy is a much more powerful emotion to harvest. This is where The Incredibles 2 comes into play. The film is responsible for the shift between fear to joy, because of the foundation it sets in place. So the villain in The Incredibles 2 is the Screenslaver, like we've mentioned, whose master plan is to break humans out of the cycle of choosing convenience over quality. She plans on breaking them by using the very screens they have become reliant on, except her plan is stopped before it comes into full fruition, so the machines get better at their jobs. People become more comfortable and reliant on them, and then we have the stepping stones to the plot of WALL-E. Fear is becoming obsolete because the machines are making life so incredibly easy and unprotected for humans. Long story short, the Incredibles films set up the technology that later leads to WALL-E, and Screensaver's plan solidifies that. It's the reason why fear becomes less prevalent as far as the monsters are concerned. Alright, there we have it, friends. Do you guys have your own theories about the Incredibles too? Give us a shout in those comments below if you do. And be sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons if you dug this video and want more great nerdy content. In the meantime though, thanks for watching everybody. I'll catch you on the next video.